Alright. Hey Art. How you doing, man?
Hello, how are you doing?
Not too bad. I'm just waiting for Craig to come in, and then I'm gonna try to find the YouTube link here for this.
Craig Browning just joined, apparently. There he is. Hello, Craig.
Yes, I just saw the little green button pop up.
At long last, we're finally there.
There's a conversation that I'm involved with, and I wasn't there.
I know, right?
Okay, then.
Alright, let me try to find the live link so that we can post it. Where is that? Links. Okay, there. YouTube page. Got it. I'll post it up now.
Quit blowing smoke in my face, Art.
Alright. Let's go back to
That's this position. It looks like I'm laying on my bed.
and paste. That's the link to the entry here. Alright. I'm going to turn you guys on mute real quick.
Sure.
That's fine.
While I'm setting this up. Alright guys, it looks like the YouTube link is up, and it's a bit delayed, so it's probably about like a minute or so delayed. So you guys can start, and we'll just take questions from both the YouTube and from the Facebook as well. I'm going to turn you guys on mute. Oh, see, yeah, it's repeating me.
No worries. Well, I've got all the questions on Facebook. Is it live now?
Yes, you're live now.
Okay. So, welcome everybody to Believe in Magic Q&A with the one, the only, Craig Browning.
Hello.
How you doing, Craig? You okay?
I'm doing just wonderful.
Good. For those of you that don't know Craig, I'd just like you to be introduced to him. So, Craig, could you introduce yourself to everybody? Just tell them who you are and what is it that you do?
I'm still trying to figure out what it is I do, but as some of you know, I'm rather prolific in writing about mentalism and bizarre magic. What's slowly evolving into urban shamanism. I am a co-founder of the New England Seance Society, as well as the Urban Shaman Fellowship on Facebook. Let's see here. I used to do big illusions, and I have a little bit of a reputation in that world. I used to work at Creative Illusions of Las Vegas, which we put out the Gemini Cage and Shadow Vision and a couple of dozen other wonderful pieces. Let's see here. What else is there? Other than that, I'm basically, believe it or not, I am arguably normal and very boring. But so for some reason, people like Art and Peter Turner and so forth, they think that I actually know something. So I will leave that up to them and up to you.
Well, that was a very comprehensive. Thank you, Craig. I'd just like to point out that you're not boring at all. Considering the stories you told me about when you used to sleep with lions. No, tigers. You slept with tigers in your bed. So no one that's normal does that. But Could you talk a little bit more about your background in illusion work?
What's to know?
How you
I,
got started in illusion work, and then what sort of made you
well,
go
I
into
got
the more
started in
non-illusion
magic.
field?
I got started in magic because of the old Alakazam show with Mark Wilson. Um, in around, well, it would have been the Christmas of '63. My mom bought me a magic kit, and I take it back, that'd be '64. That she bought me a magic kit and started helping me learn simple magic tricks. This is one of those little box sets that were appropriate for really young kids. So it was like little plastic cups and bowls and the little wooden billiard balls and a Chinese prayer vase and things like that. Very simple elementary magic. But as I got older and learned how to read, or as I was able to talk my mother into doing so, we would do the library routine, and she would sit down and help me learn tricks. And sometimes I'd even sucker my father into helping me do tricks to bring things up a little bit. I ended up working very young as a child entertainer. My first official shows, if you want to call them that, was doing shows for the other kids in the neighborhood in my backyard. They paid a quarter apiece to come to see me work some very simple magic, but the big trick in the show was making my pet beagle disappear.
Sorry, your pet what?
My pet beagle.
Beagle, as in a little small dog.
Yeah, he was appropriately Snoopy.
Awesome.
Yeah, but by the time I was 10 years old, I lucked into situations where I started doing some corporate gigs as a noted storybook character by the name of Christopher Robin. And that's really what started me down the path towards big illusions, is because I was working with these giant puppets and big illusions and just kind of directing things on stage. And ultimately, by the time I was in my early teens, I was in love with big illusions. And technically, I still am. I just don't perform them anymore. They're too big and they're too expensive nowadays. When I look back on my younger years, back in the 70s, early 80s, I had shows that cost entire, 1 hour shows that cost less than one prop does nowadays. So I ultimately started working with Ken Whitaker in Las Vegas and developing a few things like Shadow Vision, which I'm really proud to have been a part of that whole scenario. Before that, I worked and studied with Kurt Kirkham, who's one of the more noted builders and collectors of magic. Unfortunately, Alzheimer's took him a few years ago. But through him, I was able to work with the actual equipment that was made famous by Thurston and Dante, Blackstone, and others. I even used Ricciardi's sub-trunk for a couple of years. Let's see, I think that really covers most of it. There are a couple of effects that will be coming out in the next year, hopefully, that come from my magician days. I've got, not to put a jinx on things, but we've got a couple pieces of livestock magic coming out, and some other fun stuff, big illusion-wise. So inexpensive big illusions, I should emphasize. I'm also working with Bill Montana in developing a line of very cost-effective big illusions that anybody can afford.
Well, that sounds really exciting.
We're talking about pieces that, you're talking a couple of grand a piece instead of several grand a piece, that are easy to do and easy to store. So we'll see where that ends up at sometime next year.
Well, yeah, that all sounds really, really good. Big illusions is something that I've got not much knowledge about, so I'm quite excited for those releases next year. How did you then branch into mentalism and what we like to define as urban shamanism? And if you could sort of briefly explain what urban shamanism is.
In the mid-'70s, I had the opportunity to see a certain gentleman from South America. I mentioned him earlier, Ricciardi, and I saw him do the buzzsaw. And that kind of got my mind going down a twisted path. I ultimately created a big, macabre rock and roll illusion show, which featured a Blackstone-style buzzsaw. The impalement, I'm the first person to do the impalement with blood spilling. I don't know of anybody else that's done it, but I worked that out. I did the cremation and 2 or 3 other grotesque illusions, and I mixed a lot of mentalism into that program because it fit with the morose ideas that we were using in the program. It just kind of stuck, and when I started having physical problems and getting where I couldn't lug around the big show, I kind of kept with the bizarre magic side of things. And because I started working by day as a reader, everything kind of blended together, and I started doing more and more mentalism. Just mostly like private parties, people's living rooms, psychic fairs, things like that, opened up a lot for me. And it just became a natural flow. I just kind of evolved into it. Now, originally I had tinkered with mentalism in the early 80s. The reaction I got from doing those early shows scared the living crap out of me because people wanted to make me their guru. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't expecting it. I mean, I was used to pushing around big boxes and getting an applause. With this stuff, when it's done right, you can actually start a religion. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't in the market for doing that at the time. I probably could be very wealthy had I used that opportunity, but it just wasn't part of me. So it took about 8-9 years down the road before I actually started doing mentalism full time. Between the bizarre side of things and the mentalism side of things, I was doing murder mysteries, the seances. We had a evening with a vampire where you had dinner with a vampire, and actually I wasn't the vampire. I was the butler in that show, and my stepson was the vampire. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun doing those shows, and we had a wonderful 30,000 square foot mansion in which we did these shows. It was a bed and breakfast at the time, and it was just a fun location to work. Just amazing location to work. That was in Ohio. I've done a few things in other areas, Nashville area, and Reno, Nevada. But ultimately ended up doing a lecture for Andy Levis's 72 Hours Get-Together, which was a blast. The Banachek was there, Rick Ma, and a handful of others. And I fell in love with New England during that particular gathering, and ended up moving here in Western Mass in the spring of '03. And had the shows lined up and everything else, and ended up getting knocked on my butt medically. So that kind of changed my whole perspective on what I was going to be doing and how I would go about doing things.
Would you talk also a little bit about your maternal and paternal side of your families? As I understand that you come from a background where there's a lot of what's the right word to us? How do I describe this? But there's a lot of the spiritualist and evangelists in your family. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, at one point there were 5 ministers during my lifetime. My dad's father was what they call a circuit preacher. He's one of these that would go around drinking poison and playing with the snakes and all that stuff. He is a very hard man and very fire and brimstone Southerner with the way he did things. Now, my father's stepfather, on the other hand, was a very gentle guy, and he was known as a water witch, a dowser. He found coal veins that are still in use today, Sweetwater wells that are all over the Blue Ridge, the Bluefield, West Virginia area, which is where Michael Lamar's from, actually, and northwestern Virginia itself. When I was about 9 years old, Taylor put dowsing stick, the Y stick, in my hands for the first time, and taught me how to follow water pipes underneath the ground, which
Wow.
is an interesting experience. But between him and his wife, which is my real grandmother, I learned about pendulum work and dowsing and a little bit about card reading. My grandmother read playing cards, and she also read tea leaves. So, I had that part. She was considered a healer in the area that they lived in, but she used biblical passages and things for doing the healing work, which is very similar to what everybody's talking about nowadays with hoodoo and so forth. It is Appalachian Mountain Magic is what they were doing, which is on both sides of the family. On my mother's side of the family, we have my great-great-grandmother, who is the daughter of a Cherokee shaman. And if I remember right, he married a woman that was Dutch. And with my great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother, she was became a midwife and local healer, and she was known for all kinds of different stuff. And her daughter, my great-grandmother, kind of took up, but not as much. And she was more on the religious side than my great-great-grandmother was. And that brings us up to my mother and her real father, who was kind of a stranger to me because he divorced my grandmother, and he was more or less a vagabond, to be kind about it. He back in the 30s and early 40s, he corresponded with Aleister Crowley by mail. He traveled the country doing readings and vaudeville type stuff, carnival work, and kind of a lot of the stuff that I do today. He was quite interesting, and to this day there are older people within the esoteric world that when you mention his name, they just turn white. So I guess he had a rather interesting reputation.
So I suppose you could say that this kind of entertainment is in your blood, really.
It is. It is. I mean, as a hobo clown type character, he actually got to work with Houdini 2 or 3 times, and that's an interesting little caveat. Uh-oh, we got telephone call.
Schoolboy error.
No more. There we go. Go away. Go away. Go away. Go away. Go away.
You see, we're professionals, people.
What's that?
Ever the professional, aren't you?
They'll get a message on it. I knew that was going to happen. I just knew that was going to happen.
One other aspect of part of your life that I'm quite fascinated about is your work on urban shamanism. As myself as an elemental manipulator, that aspect of mentalism or magic really fascinates me. And you're working on a book at the moment along with myself called Urban Shamanism. What got you into the actual shamanistic side of mentalism? And could you just describe a little bit about what it actually involves and definition of urban shamanism?
Talking about my family kind of ties into this. Since my teens, I've done readings. I have worked kind of on the side, I guess you would say, at trying to blend magic with metaphysical thinking. And of all people, Louise Hay, who was one of the big New Age gurus back in the 80s, she challenged me one night to create a show that conveyed the things that she taught and more or less believed, what we believed. And that challenge really took root. And it's what evolved for me, helped me evolve towards the urban shaman side of things. During the time that I was interacting with Louise, I was studying with the Hopi Indian tradition and with a group called Toteg. And there goes my Skype. Ended up learning slowly how, like during festivals and things, to create routines, such as my rice bowl routine, where I talk about drought and prayer and so forth, and how you end up with the rice and the water and abundance, for lack of a better term. Mary Talmadge has got a beautiful lotus bowl routine, which is about a drought in the Southwest. It's a perfect example of urban shamanism. The idea behind urban shamanism, for me, started off with very neo-pagan perspectives, taking a ritualistic approach to creating magic, using trickery as a way of helping convey a message as part of a ritual to help stimulate people's senses. We talk about the deception side of it when you use it. It's not so much for people to believe in what we've done, it's to help them stimulate their faith. It's just like all the trimmings, the stained windows and everything you find when you walk into a church. It's all there for an effect on the individual. And that's one way of working with the urban shaman tradition. Now, we've watched David Blaine do his approach with it. We've got like our friend Stuart Palm, who takes more of a Asian approach, a Buddhist approach, with Qigong and similar concepts, how to reach into a person's mind because he's a hypnotist. And I mean, people without Stuart ever saying it, other people were giving him credit for being a Qigong master. So, no, it's just allowing people, as Stephen Minch put it in one of his books years ago, you allow people to assume. You don't correct them. You allow them to assume what they will. It's like the Dunninger explanation. You're going to have believers and disbelievers. Your job isn't to tell them which way to go. Our job is to create the mystery. I mean, you yourself do some interesting things when it comes to urban shamanism, and it's closer to the stuff that I was looking at. Being able to go out into nature and use natural cycles, the natural course of things, as your tools. Making clouds disappear, reappear, use them for psychological forces. When you see a cloud that looks like a big bunny rabbit, you manipulate the conversation to where somebody's thinking about a bunny rabbit, and bang, there it is in the sky. This is the stuff that creates legend. Bill Montana's got several pieces. One of the funniest ones he told me about was he's walking around an old spiritualist camp, and they have a fountain. And he picks up a rock, and he mumbles a prayer over it and tosses it into the fountain, and the rock's floating. I mean, we're talking about a big hunkin' rock. And he's looked at for being a miracle worker. Now, I'm not going to go into how it worked, but some of you might have a theory behind it. I will warn you that it's not as simple as you're thinking. But
I've got ideas already in mind.
well, it's not as simple as you're thinking. There's a little bit more to it than that. I would recommend contacting Bill, and he can fill people in on it. Bill Montana, which I believe is listening in at the moment. I hope he managed to figure it out. Bill's got some brilliant stuff with his work with Pulse and the invisible orb, psychological orb that we use. I just did a teleseminar with Bill 2 weeks ago about back room cells and so forth, and it went over quite well. But when you're working with the elements, making the moon move about or vanish, playing games of the sun, reach into the archives out there. You've got the Bible, which is full of natural phenomena that comes off as being miraculous. The sun dances around in the sky. The classic wizard stunt of making the sun disappear because of an eclipse. But we've also got solar flares and iridium lights in the air, such as all the space trash that goes by. It's mapped, and there's ways of knowing when it's going to appear in different parts of the sky. I think there's Michael Cybranson that came up with that approach of understanding how to work with that. And it's very cool because you can tell people, you can prove to people that you have communication with ETs by saying, if you don't believe me, there will be a craft that you can see at this point in time in the morning over the eastern sky or wherever it might be. And they will, if they get up and they look outside, they'll actually see something streaking across the sky. That's not a normal object. They know it's not an airplane or anything like that. It's a moving object, an identified flying object. So that's urban shamanism, is using that type of phenomenon, as well as something as old hat as psychic surgery and metal bending and stopping clocks and all that. It's all tied in. The urban shamanism combines, I can't believe I'm saying this, it combines magic with mentalism, but it's how you combine it. I'm presently learning how to do the Hindu cups and balls because it is an aspect of street mysticism in a big part of the world. And anybody that's watched an accomplished person do Hindu cups and balls, even if you know sleight of hand, it's going to drive you nuts because it doesn't work the way normal cups and balls work. And it's quite an amazing feat to watch somebody do it. And going back again with the rice bowls and things like that, when I do the rice bowls, it actually rains when I produce the water. And I feel like I'm repeating myself, but that goes back to think of what a shaman would do and how a shaman would create certain miracles. Look at the older resources in magic and classic pieces. I mean, the Loto bowl literally goes back thousands of years, just like the cups and balls. So look at the history of things. Even something as what some might call corny, but the Hindu rope trick, or for that matter, a Hindu basket. I forgot what they call him, the Amazing Head or something like that. That was on AGT. He did the classic fakir levitation with the post and so forth. And I mean, it blew people's minds. But that's some of the stuff that the urban shaman can get away with.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to ask you one more question about yourself before we go on to the questions from people on Facebook. Some people might not know this, but you have a few health issues going on at the moment, and you are very open about discussing them and how they actually sometimes help you in your work. Could you just briefly touch on that?
You want me to tip one of my biggest secrets, huh? I have MS, along with 2 or 3 other issues, and it creates a weakness to where I can't stand on my feet for too long. I have some mobility.
I've seen you run to the kitchen to grab a burger.
Yes, you have. Yes, and you've seen me beat my cats. So, but not really, folks. I've got 2 cats, and they're the best medicine I've ever had. But I have a lot of issues. I was talking about how I ended up in Western Massachusetts and health issues hit me. I literally had a psychological snap shortly after I got here, and went into a deep depression. And when they started doing tests on me, they found out part of the reason for the depression is I was juggling a significant amount of pain. And it just...
I can see why that would make you depressed, to be honest.
But fortunately, they've gotten me fairly stable, and I'm doing better health-wise. I'm regaining strength where I lost it at one point. At the worst, I only had about 30% strength in my left leg, and now it's up to about, I think that we figured out it's about 70-75% in strength now. So, you know, I'm turning the corner, as it were, and I'm trying to get more independent. I'm becoming more visible again and doing more performances, as well as the teleseminars. I've got another teleseminar coming up in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, on the 24th of September. Some of you guys might be interested in it. It's about seances. I posted links earlier to the seance. You can just sign up. There's no commitment yet, but you can just sign up for it. And I also left links to the 2 free PDFs on the Introduction to Mentalism and Introduction to Cold Reading. The PDFs have a list on the back in the back section of all the books that one should take a look at during their first, second year, and so forth in cultivating these skills. So, you know, that's going to be a big boon. You're talking about performance and so forth. I won't go into a lot of details, but when I'm performing, I do a lot of muscle reading. And how do I word this? You're evil, Art. You're evil.
The best of us are.
Anybody that's familiar with muscle reading understands the need for contact. I have a built-in excuse for contact because I need to be stabilized when I'm standing, especially if I don't have my cane with me. So it's only natural for somebody in the committee to be holding my arm, or sometimes both sides. And I think you can figure out from there why this is such a wonderful advantage. If you don't understand why, then I suggest you go to a handful of sources. Let's start with the Banachek Psychophysiological Thought Reading book, as well as Disc 3 of his Psi series. That will give you a foundation to muscle reading. If you really want to learn muscle reading after you've experimented with it, then save up your pennies and get Jerome Finley's, I think he calls it FCMR, I think is what he calls it. But it's a complete course from start to advance on muscle reading, and I highly recommend it. So, next.
Thank you very much. That's awesome. So, I'm going to move on to the questions from the Full Circle, the Believe in Magic Facebook page. And I'm not going to do them in order. I'm just going to choose one at random. Stuart Palm would like to know what colour underwear he has on.
Brown. Brown and yellow, I should say.
Brown and yellow, fair enough. So, okay, so he also would like to know, would you trade your health issues in for the insight and knowledge that you've gained through them?
No. No. I appreciate all the lessons I've had in life, whether they're blessings or quote-unquote curses. It's what molded me. You know, the hard times have molded me as well as the good times. So, and the other side of the coin is I've cheated death so many times over the years that, you know, this is nothing compared to what my life could have been. So, you know, I'm not too worried about it. I look at the health issues, and the reason why I'm open with them is because I've got a collection of emails from people that were thanking me because they wanted to go further into magic, but they didn't think they could because they were in a wheelchair or they had burns or whatever the case might be. And they realized because of me and a handful of other people out there that it was okay to follow your dreams.
Sound advice. We're going to have a bit of a controversial question now. And this one comes from Sean McCarthy, who asks, what is your opinion on mentalism today? Are we experiencing a golden age, or were things better in the past when secrets were more secret?
Okay. Like I said, that's a big can of worms.
And that's why I want you to answer it.
What we have today, arguably, is not mentalism. There's a hell of a lot of mental magic, but not a lot of mentalism. The part that I'm grateful for, and a lot of the other old farts like me are grateful for, is there's a small handful that are not satisfied with doing the commercial mental magic type shows. They want something that feels real. They want something that is more experiential. Mm-hmm. And that group is moving in, is slowly discovering, and I hate to say it this way, but partly because of that book that I offer for everybody for free, they're learning about the old school thinking, which has been suppressed for most of the past 15, 20 years. I'm talking about the Robert Nelson thinking, Richard Webster's thinking back in the 80s, how to go out and work as the real deal. Now, when I say the real deal, I don't necessarily mean psychic. You can be an expert in body language or psychological expert that understands anything from graphology, which is handwriting analysis, to, you know, reading somebody drawing pigs or trees or whatever the case might be that you want to work with. The thing is, and Paul Brook pointed this out, is that you need to be honest with your claims.
What do you mean by that?
Well, for an example, I've got a friend who is a scientist by trade. He's an engineer in very pragmatic mindset. He cannot go out and do what I do. He cannot go out and do readings and so forth and be as convincing at it as I am, because that's not his nature. That's not who he projects himself as being. You know, he's an analytical person. So if he does a reading on a person, it's got to be based on analytical principles. But at the same time, I can't go out and be the staunch scientist type character that he is, because it's not my nature, it's not my personality. Um, so, no, you have to be who you are naturally. Um, um, when it comes to the tree readings, um, how if you want to make money really, really fast, learn how to do the tree readings. I used to work college campus areas a lot, and I would get together a group of 15, 20 young people and hand them all blank paper and markers, and they each paid $20 a piece, and they would draw pictures, mix them up, and I would go through and start reading who was who and describing them. And I'd have all these kids rolling on the floor. And within, you got 15 people, so within 20 minutes at 20, you just made $300. And these kids have had a blast. They've all got a souvenir, and you're building your reputation. And it's a combination. Now, I've deliberately left something out because I'm talking about how it was mixed up and I handed it back out. I'm not going to tip how I do it, but anybody that's familiar with pseudo-psychometry routines should be able to figure out something along those lines.
I must admit, tree readings is something that I've done in the past. I learned it originally from Al Mann, who was the inventor of tree readings. And that's what sort of spurred me on to create my star reading system, which I'm sure you're a huge, huge fan of.
Actually, Al Mann picked that up from a psychiatrist that actually started with tree readings.
He did, yes, actually.
It goes further back than that. I got lectured on it firmly by Cesario, who was the elder statesman of the LeGrand David show here in Massachusetts some years ago. But tree readings are wonderful, and you can go a long ways. Now, my friend Enrique Enriquez does readings on art in general. He goes to art schools, and he'll do readings on the students based on the artwork that they're working on. And he also goes to art galleries and does readings based on the artwork that people are attracted to. So there's a lot that can be done with that.
Thank you for that. That was awesome. Christopher Thies, I hope I've pronounced his name correctly. If not, I'm very sorry. Would like to know, what is your single most important piece of advice for someone who wants to create a career out of performing magic or mentalism?
Don't do it.
Well, let's imagine that you're giving them advice on how to do it. Let's try and be the nice uncle today.
It depends on what direction you want to go. In my marketing books, which are not on the market right now, we're going to put them back out in a few months, but in lecture form. They're going to be a DVD. But I step a person through how to make a comfortable living, somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 a year, working roughly 25 to 30 hours a week by mentalism. Now, that don't mean that you're out doing shows, per se. It means that you're doing the footwork that was established by Nelson and Richard Webster, people before me, such as home parties and working the coffee houses and doing lectures, doing workshops, and it all involves doing readings, most all of it. What you have to do is look at it as a domino principle. If you get into a coffee shop and you're doing readings there, then you have an opportunity to open up the door for doing home parties. You also have the opportunity to open up and expand on what you're doing with the reading side of things, such as selling pendulums, teaching people how to do certain types of readings, selling pitch books. It all multiplies. When you get into the home parties, it's just like doing a Tupperware party. You walk in, you do a 15, 20-minute demonstration, then for the bulk of the evening, you're doing 10-minute readings for everybody that shows up in a private room, one at a time. Then you'd close by offering products, back of room sales. You got, again, pendulums, tarot cards, quick and easy reading systems, upselling them on readings, all kinds of different things that triple your income. So it's very easy if you're working 3 nights a week doing home parties. It's very easy to pull in $1,000 to $1,200 a week. And guys like Mark Strivings, who've talked about, done videos and things about home parties, will tell you that's not the big money. But even though some of you might think that's a lot of money, there's more to be made. I have made that much in one day working at a hair salon doing readings. Going outside of the reading format, you got your parties, which you can start changing themes to. One of my favorites is my psychic fondue party, and it's a blast, and it's courtesy of Mr. Kenton Nepper.
That sounds really cool.
Kenton has a series on subliminal messages, and it's a disc that you play for people and they pick up subliminal cues. I use it as a way for teaching people their intuition, and the Psychic Fondue Party is very deliberately very 60s, 70s. I encourage everybody to dress to the period, and we've got interesting smells in the room. I won't say what it smells like, but it's an interesting herbal mix. And there's fondue pots for fruit and meat and everything else, and it's a lot of fun. And the place is set up with beanbag chairs and so forth, so everybody can kick back and relax and just kind of chill as the CD plays. And then after that, we have a round robin to see how many people picked up on this signal and so forth, and they start realizing how many things that they miss in life. And what makes this so cool is that most of these people I have come in are salesmen. And I'm showing all these simple cues that they're missing out on, so they become more aware and better at their job. Now, some people out there are probably laughing about that, but the thing is, that's exactly what team building is about. You fill their head with positive information. Call it a placebo, whatever you want to call it, but you're giving them positive information that strengthens them and energizes them to do their job better. So, and that's the goal of all of my endeavors, psychic party or readings or whatever, is I want to empower the person or people that I'm working with. And that should be everybody's goal when they're doing that type of program.
That's really, really cool.
Now, evolving out of this, as far as the career thing goes, if you want to start doing shows, keep up with the small stuff that I was just describing, but start doing lectures or public speaking. Public speaking is a big hook for mentalism. Lee Earl, Larry Becker, Banachek, I believe. There's a lot of guys out there that work the public speaking circuit with the Red Hat Societies and JCs and all those types of groups. So start working as a speaker, and you can incorporate mentalism into whatever your topic is. That can evolve into full shows. The problem with full shows is that 90% of what you're going to have to do in the early years is four-wall the location, which means finding a restaurant that will hold 30 to 50 people comfortably. Don't shoot for bigger crowds. 30 to 50 people, and then promote the living daylights out of it to get seats in the seat. That will slowly build your reputation. But see, you've already got a mailing list because of all your clients you've been reading, all the people who have shown up for your lectures. Again, another domino effect. You've got the mailing list that you've created, and so with that, and you're getting ready to do a show, you do a flash with your email account and telling everybody about the show, and because they've been a client in the past, they save $5 or $10 on the admission, or you give them a 2-for-1 discount. So you have people in the room for that event. You want bodies in the seats. Don't worry about the money. As long as you can cover your expenses, don't worry about the money too much initially. You want to get people talking about you. Once you have them talking about you, it's easy to get the radio gigs to help promote your next event. It's easier to get public, high-profile public gigs such as festivals, fundraisers for major charities and things like that. Again, for your first couple of years, don't worry about the money, worry about the exposure, because you're building a reputation for yourself. And after a couple of years of doing this hustle, and it is a hustle, you'll be established enough in a perimeter that's about 2 hours driving time from your home. You'll be established enough to keep busy and to pull in an annual income somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 a year. And that's
very good advice.
That's reasonable. That's obtainable. Getting a Las Vegas gig is not reasonable, and it's not obtainable by most.
Sound advice. Thank you very much, Craig. We've got a question from a young lady who I'm not going to insult her by trying to pronounce her name, but she wants to know, what is your opinion on about whether or not mentalism can be considered a part of the conjuring arts?
Part of the what?
Conjuring arts.
Mentalism is a part of the conjuring arts, just like ventriloquism and juggling and mime. It's all part of magic, but it's not directly related to magic. I explained this to somebody earlier today. Well, Lee Earl has a spiel that he goes through in almost all of his videos. Magic is a passive art as far as the audience is concerned. They come in to watch the magician. They know the magician's going to trick them, but there's an agreement, an unstated agreement between the two of them that it's okay for him to trick and fool them because that's what they're there for. With mentalism, on the other hand, the object isn't to trick your audience. The object that the audience has when they come to see you to do mind reading type stuff is that what you do is potentially real. No matter what your claim is, what you're doing is considered real, and you invoke belief. Some people say I provoke belief, but that's not true. If you're coming in as an NLP expert, but you've never studied NLP, you don't have a degree in it, you don't have credentials with it, and you're using trickery to prove your NLP claims, you're just as legitimate as somebody going out and saying that they're a psychic. So, deal with it. But the thing is, that claim has got to be sustained. You sustain the claim by using factual information and weaving it around. I like to feed people information that they can find in science magazines and Psychology Today, The New Yorker, or National Geographic, all kinds of literary sources that have a little bit of bite to them. Again, this is something Paul Brook talks about in Alchemical Tools, is you feed them enough fact to where they'll assume and fill in the blank that what you've said is true. So, you don't have to bring in boogeymen and talk to the dead in order to be real. There's analytical ways of doing it. I prefer doing the psychic pagan path. But the thing is, even though my website and everything says Craig the Psychic, I don't call it a disclaimer, but it is a misnomer, because I explained that psychic ability is nothing magical and boogeyman type stuff, but an increased sense of awareness and personal training and skill that has become natural or intuitive. So I deliberately pushed the intuition side of things because that gives you a bridge between the analytical and the mystical. So you're writing in between the two extremes. And by doing that, you allow the audience to make up their own mind, to come to their own conclusions.
Brilliant, thank you. We have a question from William Cunningham, who would like to know, could you speak a little bit more on your time working with Ward Hall?
I was a sideshow magician. That's all there is to it. Ward is a wonderful man. I love him to death. I worked with him on the Wondercade show originally at the Ohio State Fair with Roy Houston. And then I later ended up working in the sideshow Circus Unique with Johnny Mia and Johnny's girlfriend, Bill Fitch, the human pincushion. No, I remember these guys because I loved watching Bill work because he used those, the T-type pins that you use to hold a wig into a wig dummy. He would use those and pierce his arm and his cheek and so forth. It would drive people nuts. But in the evenings, especially when we worked a location like Dallas, Texas, in Texas there's no dirt. It's all concrete and pavement. So he would watch the audience and find the big football player that had the little cheerleader girlfriend. And he would deliberately find a spot where a vein was so he could pop the vein and squirt the blood out. And, I mean, the action is the pin goes in and bang, it's dropped in, and the squirt and splatter would happen. Inevitably, the football player would pass out. And he got such a kick out of making them pass out from a little bit of blood. But we did all the classics, the blade blocks, the electric chair. I did a straitjacket escape along with 2 or 3 other simple effects. And we had different blow-offs. A blow-off is the extra big ding that you get, the sideshow within the sideshow, so to speak. It was hard work, low pay, but a lot of fun.
Awesome. That sounds really, really fun. I've had a private message from Peter Turner, who would like to know why are you so ruggedly handsome?
I'm blessed.
I think he has a bit of a man crush on you.
Yeah. He has withdrawals and calls me up every couple of weeks. Pete's a good guy.
He's awesome. He's a good sport. One thing that I like to do to you whenever we have a Skype chat is to challenge you to just either read my mind, tell me a card I'm looking at, or get a drawing I'm doing. So I've got a piece of paper here, and I've drawn something on it, and I'd like you to try and tell me what's inside this piece of paper, if that's okay with you.
Oh, jeez. Well, I can't hold the billet, so how am I expected to do that? I've got to touch it. It's got to be kinetic.
I could open it with the camera, and we could try to do some remote viewing.
Okay, I'm seeing straight lines and like a square type pattern. Does that make sense?
What's that, sorry?
I'm seeing like a square pattern, straight lines.
Yeah, could be.
For some reason, I feel like there's a lot of grass around. Yes.
Right, yeah.
Some kind of an animal. I think it's like in a yard. I don't think it's staked out. I think it's just a wandering little animal. I want to say dog, but I'm thinking it might be, of all things, a duck. I'm just not positive on this. I think we're looking at either a barnyard or a house setting out in the grass.
Ugh.
No, I missed it.
Want to have another go?
No. You do this to me every time we talk. I'm not that good.
Do you want to know what it was?
What?
You want to know what it was?
Yeah, go ahead. A tree. Ah.
You were getting very close with the long straight lines for the bark and grass at the bottom. I've even drawn the grass at the bottom.
Well, I shoot for 80% accuracy. And technically, it is a home.
Yes, it's a home for squirrels.
Yes, my favorite animal. I chase them frequently.
Would you like to discuss any upcoming works that you've got on at the moment? Any of the books and projects, teleseminars?
Ah, I just realized something. Anyway, well, I do have the seance seminar, which is coming up. Anybody that's interested in doing the seance for Halloween season, which to me is late September through the first week of November, they probably would enjoy this because I'm going to tip how to set up a simple seance that will scare the crap out of everybody, that you can actually go out and do within a couple of hours of within a couple of hours of the seminar. You could probably have it rehearsed enough to where you can make it work. And you probably already have all the props you need. So the seminar, or the teleseminar, comes with I think it's a 60-page book that's got some bonuses in it, and there'll be some other freebies that go with it. A couple I'm not allowed to talk about, but one opportunity that is going to be great for 12 lucky individuals. But again, I can't talk about it. So we've got in November there will be another teleseminar, but it is tied to a book that is almost completed right now, getting ready to go to the press next week, called Murder and the Psychic Detective. The book premise is about the plot, like the game Clue or Cluedo, of being able to play the part of the psychic sleuth and solve crimes created by your audience, or other types of approaches to murder mysteries. Those are the two big things that are on the front before the end of the year. And of course, by next spring, we've got the Urban Shamanism manual coming out.
The Urban Shamanism book is going to be awesome, by the way, guys. Alex Barton would like to know what realization you had afterwards when you slightly missed on the drawing. Was it some sort of epiphany? Oh, yes, of course it was a tree. I was seeing this, this, and this, or something.
Well, I have hit pretty hard with just intuition, which is what Art's trying to get me to do here. But it's something that you really have to work with day in and day out, which I don't do right now. The more you work with it, the more that you get aware of what's going on with the other person. And you kind of literally read their eyes and face to figure out what they're up to and what direction to move with the information. But through Skype and such vehicles, it's hard to do any physical reading of a person unless you have two really clear cameras and a fast speed with your computers. So I hope I've answered that. I don't know.
So Alex Bott wants to know, were you cold reading me to a certain extent?
Was I cold reading you? Yes, that's part of the process.
Yeah?
Yes. But I should define something. I said yes to that because that's the understanding people have. Cold reading to me is it's the thing you do when you first meet somebody. It is not a process. It's the first. It's a profile that you use to follow when you first meet somebody that's coming in for a reading. You can, the whole idea of Barnum statements and all the profiles and scripts. That's a magician's invention, and the majority of people that try to use that in the shut-eye world get found out in a hot second. There is a way of doing it. There is a way of using it, but I'm not going to go into that. On future projects, next spring we have a series coming out based on my book Easy Reading, and it'll be coming out as MP3 downloads. And I think, don't hold me to this, but I think they're going to be $15 a session.
Very reasonable. Good.
Which you can download anytime and watch it as many times as you want once you download it. So, Yuki.
I'm getting questions left, right, and centre here. The people are just discussing the difference between cold reading and reading and things like that. So I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think the difference between cold reading and just standard reading is, or don't you think there's a difference?
When the term cold reading is used, it usually implies the fact that you're using a series of scripts. Technically, a tarot reader is guilty of cold reading based on the Fourier concept as well as the principles behind what makes tarot work. Tarot is a language. If you look at it as a language, then you can understand why each symbol means certain things, just like letters and words mean certain things to us. Everything's got a positive and negative slant on information. Have I lost you, Art? You're all frozen up. Earth to Art. You there? Somebody yell if they hear me.
I think Art's frozen up right now.
Okay, I wasn't sure what was going on. There he is. I hear him slithering.
He's there. Let's see.
But anyhow, there's nothing wrong with learning.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you back. Good.
Whoa, what happened there?
Yeah, you're still lagging, but who knows? So, systems like you find in Red Hot Cold Reading, some of the techniques that Herb Dewey talks about in other books. Those systems are great, and it's good information to have because when you're working as
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. When you're working as a reader, for an example, when I do psychic fairs,
Yeah,
you're there
mate.
for 10, 12 hours. Yes, I do. Um, you're there for 10 or 12 hours, so you're going to get burnout.
We're experiencing some really bad connectivity problems here.
Hey, Art. I think you're lagging real bad. Craig, if you want to just keep on going, I think it's just going to keep on skipping through what Art's saying, and
Okay.
we'll have to ignore it temporarily. All right?
Okay. It's great information to have because if you start going through burnout, you got to have something to fall back on. So having those scripts memorized and knowing what to look for when you have somebody, let's say, a Hispanic woman between 25 and 35 sitting in front of you, you know how to read her physical appearance, you know how to read her culture. That's valuable information that allows you to work with the client. Now, that's the catchphrase is working with, because a good reader is going to have a communication link back and forth. It's not one-sided, and the truth of the matter is a lot of what a reader does is listen. We're not talking. We're not giving them information. We're helping them give themselves information or give themselves answers. When you actually do a pure reading, you're not using those formulas. You're deliberately allowing the information to just flow through you. And trust me, there's times when it scares crap out of you. Because you will get information that comes out of the blue that sounds totally ridiculous, but if you mention it, it makes sense to the client. I had a situation a number of years ago. The store that I was working at, mother and daughter were inside, and I just made the comment I was smelling popcorn. And at the same time, they kind of smiled and acknowledged what I said. And I said, I smell train oil from like a model railroad. Well, they were freaked out when I said that. And the reason they were freaked out is because the husband father had passed away 2 weeks before. And here's the freaky part. He had an old-fashioned popcorn machine down in their basement where he had a roughly $20,000 HO scale railroad laid out. That was his pastime. When you have stuff like that come through on a hunch, it creates that little door, like I joke about, that I'm only 93% skeptical because I've got that 7% gap in everything because I've seen and experienced too many things that come through that aren't explainable.
Right.
So I'm all for skepticism, and I encourage skepticism when I talk to my clients, whether I'm doing readings or whether I'm performing. I encourage approaching everything with a healthy dose of skepticism. But I also encourage them to learn how to trust their gut and follow their gut in making decisions and so forth. A lot of us don't. We doubt our gut. We've been taught to not listen to it and to analyze things. So is there another question, or is Art still missing in action?
Art looks like he's returned, but I can't quite tell. I can take over temporarily, though. I'm not seeing another question directly on that line, but if you remember earlier in the week, you posted some Q&A stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go and see if we can't... I don't know if you had a specific question that you remember that you wanted to answer. Here, let's see here. Let's see here. After being okay, so here, Dan Roos, earlier in the week, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, asked, after being a performer for such a long time, please share a rule of thumb in terms of performance improvement. You shared a little blurb there, but would you like to speak on that more?
Okay, it's about performing, but I wasn't clear about what aspect of performing he was talking about.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Unfortunately, that didn't end up being a long thread.
Oh.
Let's see how we reach. Just something from my point of view. I know we don't really know each other very well, other than some minor correspondence on the groups.
Mm-hmm.
I can very much understand what you're saying on the accuracy of your cold reading. Before I got into magic or anything like that, I naturally had. I was getting into that sort of stuff spiritualistically. Not so much anymore since I've learned that a lot of it's trickery. But there was a point where I was doing readings on people, thinking in my head that that's where it was coming from, when in actuality it was purely intuition. But I'd had those aha moments where I said, you know, this. I don't want to give a specific example because it's personal, but I'll say, what about this? You had this happen, or maybe this person had an issue, and just watch somebody's eyes go like way wide because you just hit a home run. So I can definitely understand the idea of having that gut feeling and just saying something and watching somebody just light up.
Well, I explain to people when I do classes on tarot, and I get a lot of magicians that come into classes like that, and they're blown away because I tell them, ignore all the stuff you've learned from the magic shops and magic books. Just work the tarot the way the book is written. And they get blown away because they get very hard hits and very solid readings. But that's the way it works with any system. You have to work with a system and within the parameters of that system. And once you get good at the what I call the book knowledge side of it, the more you do it, the more, for lack of a better term, the more sensitive you become. And the more you begin to intuit information. Part of that is because you're getting used to communicating with people. The people that are effective communicators usually are interacting with lots of people every day, and it just becomes second nature for them to do it. Your top therapist, for lack of a better term, in society are bartenders, hairdressers, barbers, and sometimes taxi cab drivers, and of course the best friend. Once you get out of that circle, it starts getting iffy because people get afraid of the stigma when it comes to going to see a professional therapist, and especially men. So that brings us to the next two categories as to who people see for therapy, which 9 times out of 10 will be either a priest or clergyman or a psychic. And that's rather curious, but that's the extremes to go. A professional therapist is one of the last people that most individuals will seek out because there's a stigma attached to it. And unless they do like I did and they crash and burn, they rarely get to that point of getting that assistance. I unfortunately have watched several family members go into really bad stages because of that very reason. They were afraid of going to see a therapist because of the stigma that's attached to it. So, when it comes, go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, I maybe it's just my own personal opinion, but I kind of feel like people would seek out clergymen or psychics because whereas a therapist is learning and still seeking out information, supposedly clergymen speak directly with God and psychics are supposed to know. Those are two people who know what's going on. as opposed to somebody who's learning what's going on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. When I work with a client, and I've read this in a couple of shut-eye books, and for those that don't know, the term shut-eye refers to people that aren't involved with mentalism and magic. You set the client down and you teach them about the oracle that you're working with and help them see the information that you're conveying to them. The reason you do that is 9 times out of 10, if they come to you with a problem, they already know the answer. They already know what they're supposed to do. They just can't take that deep breath and take that plunge. So you're kind of helping them do what's right. You're not directing their life, but you're giving them enough information to where they can make a proper decision.
It's almost like you're giving them permission.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said earlier, a lot of the work as a reader is being a sounding board. You know, you get the women and middle-aged women that are going through a divorce. They need a shoulder to cry on. So you let them cry on your shoulder a little bit, and you give them some options to help improve their life. I'm a really bad businessman when it comes to the psychic thing because I don't want people codependent on me, and I don't want them coming back constantly. I want to give them tools that that allow them to stand on their own 2 feet. And
you want to be who they need when they who they need you to be right then.
yeah, and I also want them. I want them to, as we used to say, I want them to claim their power. I want them to realize that they are complete and that they're okay, and they don't need a guru necessarily. It's okay to check in. You know, I don't have any problems if somebody wants to check in a couple of times a year, but I do have problems when you're in 2 or 3 times a week. Because that's when you're being codependent. That's when you're not doing the footwork you need to do to fix your life.
You're asking somebody else to do it.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't believe in prescribing that placebo. I believe in giving people the tools and the perspective that will help them change their situation. And sometimes that means handing them the business card of a local therapist.
I love this, and I love this kind of performer mentality that you and some the other, especially the more, like you said, the mentalists, not so much as the mental magic performers have, that you're not in the business to astonish and amaze. You're in the business to help people, and you just use your mentalism as a tool to do that.
Well, that's a lot of the core to the urban shaman thing that I was talking about earlier, is that we believe in empowerment and strengthening people, whether it's a child or a senior citizen on their deathbed. There are ways of helping that person become more comfortable, more confident, and prepared, for lack of a better term, for what they're facing. And sometimes it might be just telling a parable doing the gypsy thread, you know, about how your life comes apart, and then, you know, with a little bit of determination, it can be restored. Those stories and ways of capturing people's heart. Lee Earl put out a thing years ago called the Musing Box. And basically it's a story about a music box that gets broken, and the performer puts it back together again, but it's haunted. And you hear it play all through the story. He opens the lid and it plays, and then he closes it, it stops. But at the very end, when you open it up, there's no music gears inside it. It's just an empty wooden box. And I don't know how many times I've performed that, and there's always people crying in the room because of the story. And that's what I do, and most of the urban shaman people I work with, that's what we do, is invoking those emotions and get people to commit to that emotion and be in the presence of something miraculous. Because if I can touch you and pluck your heartstrings, I can get you to think and listen to the message, which is, you know, stand up, be strong,
Right. You're standing there and it's almost starting your religion without. Actually, we have a really good question from Stuart Palm and it works right with what we're talking about. He says, question for Craig: what is the difference between a good and a self-aware member of the clergy and an urban shaman?
I'm not anti-clergy in the sense of the work they do. They do a lot of good things.
Right.
I am very much opposed to organized religion, just in general, because it gets too political.
Right. Agreed.
But the local priest usually is a pretty good person, and what they do is very similar to what we've been talking about. They generally help people to become more empowered. Unfortunately, they do that by encouraging them to lean on what could be seen as questionable thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think everybody should read the Bible as well as the Quran. But I think you should read about other religions too. At one point in time, I literally had over 1,000 books on different religions, and most of it was the holy books from the different religions. And I've read them all. What's that?
I said I have a collection of my own the same way, so I understand that.
Well, I think it's very important to absorb knowledge. Truth and wisdom exist in everything. So, I mean, even the writings of Anton LaVey, Mr. Satanism, he's got a lot of logical thinking in his material. So, I believe in that awareness and showing people where everything's more or less coming from the same source and part of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily one philosophy or theology over another one. I think it's all part of the same.
All part of the bigger picture.
Yeah. And now, when it comes to the urban shamans' work, I mean, we can go to certain extremes with drumming and rattles and all that stuff. But 9 times out of 10 when we're doing that, it's with somebody that is interested in that type of treatment. I had a client several years ago when I was in Reno. His grandmother was terrified because this other psychic in town had threatened to curse her and the family unless she gave her X number of dollars and all this other stuff. And her grandson came to me and asked if I would be willing to help her overcome her problems, because he knew about my background as a performer. And he's college educated. His grandmother was, generational Native American and had lived on the reservation her whole life, and her primary influence spiritually was Native traditions, with a little bit of Catholicism thrown in on the side. So I walked her through a cleansing. I walked her through a protection based on that tradition, the shamanic traditions of her tribe, and basically said that we were banishing and dispelling the curse of that other psychic. Now, had I taken that approach, gone to her and approached her with science and analytical thinking and so forth, nothing would have taken.
She wouldn't have heard it at all.
No, she wouldn't have heard it at all. She would have rejected it and rejected me. But by approaching her on her own level and with her own sense of perspective, I was able to empower her and let her feel safe and let her become free of this grip. The psychics in question that pronounced this curse were 2 sisters who had a network all over the state of Nevada and parts of California. And the local psychics in Reno actually did a press release that distanced them from these two women and insisted that the local police investigate these women and put them out of business because of the dirty stunts they were doing to the Native Americans and low-income people in the area. So, you know, the psychics tend to clean their own house sometimes.
Right. It almost seems like kind of a good and bad on both sides sort of thing.
There always is. You always have a handful of blowhards. Within the psychic world, you've got the guys that are out looking for headlines, like James Van Prague and John Edward and so forth. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the handful of charlatans. The crooks in the psychic world probably are less than 15% of the overall count of people that do psychic work. The majority of psychics honestly believe in what they're doing. They honestly want to work and help people. They're not interested in usury. A lot of them will actually do things for free or barter instead of cash if they feel like the person has an honest need. So the typical psychic out there rarely makes more than $35,000 a year. So they're definitely not in it for the money.
Right. It sounds much more like it's the need to help, or it's almost a need. The desire to help another person sounds like it's the main motivation here.
Yes, very much so. Going back on some of the stuff that we've been talking about on performance and so forth, we can convey information when we perform. One of the Hermetic axioms is that the mind creates all. And I tie that concept in with a routine where I show an empty envelope. And I ask somebody to hold on to that envelope, and I have them focus on a deck of cards that's invisible. It's all in their mind. And they narrow it down to one card. And then I have them open up the envelope again, and that one card is in the envelope. Now, the idea, even though that's obviously something sneaky about it, the idea is that I've gotten the message across about how the mind creates things that we focus our energy on. And that's a kind of a primer. It's an opener to take us into other demonstrations that shows how the mind creates things, such as our disease, how we place ourselves into a state of imbalance, which creates illness in our life. Whether it's deliberately eating junk food that we know we're not supposed to be eating, but we eat it anyway, or our actions, whether we're not punctual or we're lazy in some other ways.
Right.
So, there's always a creation factor that goes on. So, and I think it's important in our performances that we convey lessons, for lack of a better term. In the magic world, you've got the Christian Magicians Association, and they go out and teach the gospel using magic. So why can't we use mentalism to teach people about general positive thinking processes?
Right. Well, I think it was an interview I watched with Ken Gillette, if I'm remembering correctly. He was always saying in a good show he wanted to see, he wanted to learn a history thing, he wanted to learn a vocabulary thing, and most of all, he wanted something from the heart. If you didn't have those three things, then he didn't feel like you had a good show.
Okay.
You know, it's you know, if you're not have something from the heart of another human being, like it's just you're just up there to be up there.
Well, the performer has to connect with his audience,
Right.
and it's not just going out there and being in front of people and doing things. If you're not connecting with your audience, I don't care if you have the most perfect pass or dove steel or whatever, the audience is not going to respond.
Right.
You have to be able to make that connection. And with mentalism, mentalism is a very personal approach because you're reaching inside of at least a person's mind, if not their heart and soul in some cases. We can get in there into the deep personal areas. I mean, I've watched people at a Kreskin show just break down crying.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, George has been around for many years, and he does a great Q&A. But, you know, when I'm watching him work and I'm seeing the same reactions in his show as I see in a spiritualist church, I mean, that tells me that this stuff is powerful.
Right. Right. Very strong.
And we have a responsibility when we do it. Be entertaining. Inject levity into what you're doing. It doesn't have to be boring and dramatic, but when you step into I do the Q&A as a finale, and anybody that's recently picked up my Thoth's Wisdom knows the Q&A that I use. It's basically using the major arcana of a tarot deck. I cut it several times. I have other people cut it, and we pass out the cards. And I walk in without seeing the cards. I walk in on people and start describing the card and describing the energy around them. It's not a classic Q&A where you're playing with billets. It's a very powerful closer. I developed it for a handful of reasons, and one reason, admittedly, is to generate business post-show. It goes back to the back of room sales. People see me do this stuff with the tarot deck in the show, they're going to want to make an appointment after the show. It's that, it's that simple. And you can do this with numerology, handwriting analysis. My buddy Tony Rosano has done a routine called Psygraphico that's been around for 30 years, I guess. It was originally featured in Bascom Jones's Magic. It was developed by Sir Hardy. It's a great routine on handwriting analysis. It's a Q&A, it's a one-ahead system, but it's beautiful the way it's set up, and it makes you look like you're an expert at handwriting study. And again, you can step it up and sell reports to people based on their handwriting and give them a more scientific perspective instead of the esoteric. So there's material out there that can be used. But have fun with it. Have good things in it. I used to do a Poison Monte routine that was set up. I used every theme from every game show that I could find. So we used the Jeopardy music. We did Price is Right music. I mean, it was a blast. It was funny. We had the podiums downstage with the flashing lights when we called people down to play the game. But you know, it was a roulette routine that we did. We put high production into, so the people were being entertained along with the mystery.
Right. It seems like to me the most successful performers aren't the ones that they're the ones that really kind of find that the magic and the mentalism really isn't the important part. You know, it's there to help facilitate.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, watch Lance Burton. I mean, Lance connects with the audience on so many levels because he really is just an average guy. You know, that happens to be wearing a tuxedo. And he's good at what he does. He projects everything in a great way. But when he's doing the show, he's connecting with the people in the room. And Lance is the last of the old style performers, as far as I can tell. He's comparable to the Blackstone show and Dante. So, no, it's sad that he's not touring right now because he should be. But obviously, he don't need to. But
all right. Well, I mean, we're coming close to the end of our hour. Is there any other topics you'd like to cover? Looks like we got about 4 viewers left on the Q&A. I'm not seeing any more questions. Is there anything you'd specifically like to talk about? Would you like to plug anything?
I don't have anything more than what Art and I already discussed. If anybody has any questions, they can feel free to email me. You can reach me through Facebook, and I'm always willing to answer questions or to help where I can.
I just got an update. Let me see if that was another question coming through. Okay, so actually, Stuart Palm again. What is the most amazing thing you have seen in a situation where you are not performing that, as far as you know, was magic? They gave you that 7% feeling.
Oh, I would have to say that the most weird experience I ever had was, and it's important, I had a series of things that were all related around the same event. On August 1st, no, it was August 11th rather, in 2001. I was doing a radio show, and the DJ asked me towards the end of the interview if I saw anything coming up, and I explained to him, I said, several shaman in the area and psychics, myself included, have been having disturbing dreams for several months. And it was as though there was a huge mountain bursting into flames. And the only thing that we could consider is that it was a volcano someplace in the northwest. But he asked when this volcano would happen. I said sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks. Well, 4 weeks later, almost to the minute, airplanes crashed into the Twin Trade Towers. And if you think about it, those are man-made mountains. It was even inferred as such in the King Kong movie that was made back in the 70s, tying it into the ape thinking that it was his roost. The description that we gave, that it would fill the earth with fire, the air with fire and smoke, that it would shake the ground, but that it would create problems for the entire world. It would impact the entire world. It was all 100% on. We just didn't realize that it was a man-made situation. About 2 weeks after that, I was working at the shop, and a guy came in for a reading. And I did the reading, and it showed a close call with death and something horrific. And at the end, when I got through with that, he laid down an airline ticket. And that was for the flight that crashed into the field on 9/11.
Oh, jeez.
That freaked me out. But the one that happened 2 days later was a mother and daughter. And again, I came up with a near death situation that was catastrophic. And then the mother conveyed the story that they had an appointment in the Twin Towers that morning. And the mother had gotten seriously ill the night before. And, I mean, it was to the point where they had to cancel the appointment and go home. The further away they got from New York, the better the mother started feeling. And, I mean, it's just weird stuff like that happens when you have those types of connections. that it blows your mind. I'll give one more example. A lady that I did a reading for in Ohio at a psychic fair. I'm using what they call the Abukara, which is a unique deck from New Zealand that's based on bibliomancy. But it comes up that there's something from the past dealing with an inheritance and a lost love. And she's going on with me that there's nothing about it, and then about halfway into the reading, she starts crying. And I asked her what I said, what was wrong, and she says, I know what the relationship that you were talking about is. Her first fiance was killed in Vietnam. It was MIA in Vietnam. Well, I pointed out, it says something is going to happen the next 3 days or 3 weeks, I'm not certain, that's going to confirm, and it has something to do with you getting money. 3 days later, she calls the store trying to track me down, and she had received a certified letter from the Pentagon that she was being paid his insurance, his life insurance policy, because he had officially become a tragedy of Vietnam War.
You know, man, that's powerful stuff. Like, I don't know, some part of me wants to believe that, you know, part of intuition is, you know, part of it's going to be practice. Oh, there's my camera. Part of it's, you know, practice just being in tune with with people. You're being in touch with people on a constant basis, and you almost get a feeling for your environment, because I've been under the belief my entire life that people are part of your environment.
Yes.
And that's they're probably the part of your environment that affects you the most. So if you can be in tune with that, you'll be more in tune with the world around you.
Well, Edgar Casey pointed out many years ago that being psychic only means you're aware of your environment, but you're aware of the most minute shifts and dynamics within that environment. If you learn how to pay attention and actually focus, like, you know, there's a doorknob over there. Well, look at the details in the doorknob. When you start becoming more aware of the finite, the microcosm, it's amazing how much you can pick up. But you see Conan Doyle talk about it in all the Sherlock Holmes stories. And it's really my belief that's what psychics do, even though psychics don't realize it. It's my belief that they're picking up on those really fine elements within their environment, and they're really fine signals that are given off by the people that they're interacting with.
Right. There was a show I watched, and I can't remember, but it was a really interesting concept the guy brought up. He was talking about how to win at a game without cheating, and it's about, like everything else, having the most information. If we opened up a deck of cards, just me and a layman, and I said, we're going to just draw from the top, I'll draw first, no matter what, I'm going to win if we draw for a high card, because I'm either going to get an ace or a king, depending on which deck we pick out and, you know, how that particular deck is stacked. But, you know, there will always be that whoever has the most information is going to be able to make the most informed decision. You know what I'm saying? It gives you that upper hand on everyone else.
Yeah.
In his case, he was talking about cheating without cheating, but in this case, it would be, you know, if you know more about the world, you know, if you know what a lighter is, fire doesn't seem scary.
Well, one of the things I point out, to the more cynical folks out there, is that we really are the magicians and wizards of old. And what they did was science for their era.
Mm-hmm.
And we are, by gaining knowledge and collecting knowledge, you can't see it right now, but I've got 2 huge bookcases over there. I've got bookcases in the other room. And I've read all this. I've absorbed all of it. I've got something like 1,200 books on a disc, and having that knowledge, like I said earlier, the spiritual knowledge, the wisdom teachings, the parables, how to take, in our case, magical effects and apply them to those concepts. All of this is power, and I believe that's what and how the old wizards worked, because they were wise artists. They had knowledge, they had wisdom. And
Right, you always see the old wizards depicted as wise old men, almost like the like Buddhist monks. You get the long beard, and like they knew chemistry, and they played with alchemy and all sorts of stuff. So it was always the thinkers.
Yeah, well, they were thinkers. They experimented in botany, chemistry, all these different things. And most of the images, even old woodcuts of a wizard, shows them around piles and piles of books.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of them were librarians to support their habit.
Well, right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was old. Well, I think that even what we do today, I mean, something as simple as, back palming a card, all you're doing is withholding information from somebody. It's
right.
Perspective and withholding information. I have a little bit more information than you do. That's what makes this seem magical.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I've had a blast. I hope people got something out of it, and maybe we'll get together again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for doing this with us. You've been great at answering all the questions presented at you. Hopefully I can have a private Skype session with you at some point, and we can talk further.
Anytime.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Craig, and this will conclude our broadcast this time. We'll talk to you a little bit later. You have a great day, all right?
Okay, you too.
Bye, man.